What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to NFL Turf Talk here on DSM Media's Turf Talk YouTube channel. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Today, we are breaking down the NFC South Division. It's one of our final three divisions we have left here in the summer heading into week one kickoff. And it should be an interesting one. I'm one half of your host here, Dylan Davis. To my left, my faithful co-host, Scotty. We'll see where we break these down, but we're going to go through the offenses, the defenses, the roster changes, and then finally we'll give our regular season standing predictions and see which one of these teams is going to take home this division come end of the year. But my man, what's up?
Hey, man, Friday, once again, just got done the top 10 trios. That was tumultuous making that list. So this should be a little bit easier than that. But nonetheless, happy Friday, my man. Let's dig into this NFC South. And, a lot of change in the quarterback group in this division, right?
A lot of change and a lot of unknown, man. Yeah, no, a lot of change, a lot of unknown. We can just go down the list real quick, right? You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers moving on. The greatest of all time retires. They bring in Baker Mayfield. Obviously, he's confirmed week one starter. We'll see if he can hold on to that job over Kyle Trask and for how long. But you got Baker in Tampa. Desmond Ridder gets the call from Atlanta. He's their guy, right? Bryce Young, number one overall draft pick in this year's draft for the Carolina Panthers. And then the New Orleans Saints bringing in Derek Carr earlier on in this offseason. So basically 4 new starting quarterbacks in this division. I'd have to hit up my man Hembo or some statistician and figure out when is the last time this has happened. Has this ever happened where all 4 teams are heading into the season with a new quarterback? Only one of them, Desmond Ridder and the Falcons, had playing time last year for their respective teams, but as we all know, he did not start each game for them. They also have Taylor Heineke, who they brought in over from Washington. So it'll be interesting, man, how much they value the growth of their hopeful franchise quarterback in Desmond Ridder and going through those ups and downs with him versus maybe, they're kind of right around sub 500 and they want to win a ball game and maybe they have to turn the reins over to Heineke. It'll be interesting to see how they stick with them. But what are your overall thoughts on the landscape of this division? Don't say who, but is there a clear runaway winner with this division? Is it jam-packed from start to finish? What's kind of your outlook here?
Runaway would be strong. I think there's a consensus team that we probably should all agree that is number one to start out the season. But when you look at all the question marks across this division, do I think any team can necessarily run? There's one team that can run away with it, but do I think they will? I'm just not sure. I don't think so off the top of my head here. But when you look around this division, it is so interesting with the quarterback situation because you look at the 2 situations in, you mentioned it, Atlanta, Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, and then down in Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Obviously, Baker's starting, Desmond Ridder's starting for Atlanta.
It's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, so it's like, is the veteran in Taylor Heineke going to have to, unseat Desmond Ridder at some point? And I think for that to happen, Desmond Ridder would have to be beyond terrible, right? Like brutal. To the point where it's like he's just not helping the other players develop, right? Like Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Drake London, you can't even see what you have in them because he's that bad. Right. Do I think this is a team that's going to be competing to make the playoffs? Absolutely not. But they are a team that is trying to develop some talent there on the offensive end. So does Taylor Heineke unseat Desmond Ridder at some point in this season, like you said? And then same thing with Baker Mayfield, but the opposite, right? They're going with the veteran
guy.
They still have the team that was around Tom Brady, so maybe there's a chance that they can get into the playoffs if Baker Mayfield comes out and looks like something, from a couple years
serviceable enough to get them there.
Exactly. Yeah. But then do they get to the point in the season where things just aren't looking great? Baker's not playing like superiorly well.
Yeah.
Let's go and let's see what we have in Kyle Trask, a home state kid, right? Out of Florida. So 2 different situations, yet very similar in the sense of what are we watching for?
No, I agree with you.
Yeah,
you bring up a very interesting piece that I never really thought about because when Brady leaves, it obviously turns the NFL upside down. And you bring in a guy who Baker Mayfield, who's been a journeyman the last couple of years. Things didn't work out in Cleveland. We saw him headed to LA midway of last year. It didn't look all that pretty, and a couple games started there. But you kind of lose focus on the fact that this Tampa Bay defense is essentially the same. Those linebackers, that secondary is all still there. That was with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
You mentioned Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Rashad White in our trio talk. They're all still there. So if Baker Mayfield can come in and be an average NFL quarterback, maybe a top 18 to 19 type of quarterback play, could they still, with that roster, be in the race come playoff time, come end of the season, December, right? But when I look at the Falcons, and don't get me wrong, we're going to get into them in a little bit. I like the additions defensively, the draft pick in Bijan, the excitement's there, right? We talked about him here in Philly a lot. Kyle Pitts had a down year from his rookie season. You have Drake London, who you invested in at the number 1 wide receiver spot. You still have Tyler Algier. You still have Cordero Patterson. They're going to run the football. But to me, I see the Falcons, and I just don't see playoff vision. I don't see a world in which Desmond Ridder and this roster, although improved, is good enough and savvy enough to be in the race come December. Whereas I know that Tampa can if Baker's an average quarterback.
Yeah. They have the pieces in place. You have Todd Bowles at the head coaching spot, right? Like, you're looking at Atlanta. Arthur Smith could be on the way out mid-season this year, right? If things aren't looking up in Atlanta. So it is an interesting perspective. And I do agree with you. I just don't see it in Atlanta. Like, my question to you would be, is it possible for Desmond Ridder to be worse than what Marcus Mariota was last year, right? Like, Marcus Mariota, we've seen what he looks like in Philly so far. Now, mind you, there's a lot of things that are thrown into that equation, but can he be worse than what Marcus Mariota was for that team last year?
Well, let me ask you this as well. Take quarterback away. Strip Ridder away, strip Baker away. Not this season, but moving forward, which roster would you rather have?
Probably the Falcons, if I'm being like completely honest. Yeah.
The youth is there. They've invested on the offensive side of the ball with draft picks.
Yeah.
I talked about the additions defensively. You go out, you get Jeff Okudah, who obviously has injury concern, but you sign Jesse Bates, right? You go out, you get Calais Campbell. You already have Grady Jarrett, Bud Dupree. They have pieces defensively. They have pieces offensively. It's just I have yet to – the reason I said – quarterback play dependent, I trust the Bucs over the Falcons this year, is because I've seen the Bucs just recently in a Super Bowl, just recently in a divisional round, lost to the Rams, right? I've never seen this young core of Atlanta work out.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying they don't have on higher upside. They definitely do. The Bucs are getting older. The Falcons are younger. But I would trust the Bucs roster this season.
Yeah.
If quarterback play is stable enough, more so than I trust the Falcons roster this season.
That's a good point, because when you look at the Bucs going forward, it's like, yes, they do have a better chance at making the postseason, or at least chasing after it this season. But they also have a better chance of, mid-season, they have to blow it up. And should we look at trading Chris Godwin? Should we look at trading Mike Evans? Should we look at trading, some of those defensive pieces? So it could turn, like, the season could turn
very
over
quickly
for the Bucs very quickly, whereas the Falcons, they just got to look forward. That's what they have to do. And all they need to worry about this season is figuring out if Desmond Ridder is worth anything.
They have to survive the ups and downs of this roller coaster, whereas the Bucs, they're in a weird spot, man, because you're not looking to survive anything. Baker's not your future franchise quarterback. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are another year older into, Mike Evans just turned 30, whatever Chris Godwin is at this point, off of injury. You're just looking to survive at this point right now, right? If you're the Falcons, you have to survive those growing pains. And that's why I kind of meant with the Taylor Heineke signing is it's interesting, because if I was them, I wouldn't want a lifeline. I wouldn't want that backup option in the back of my head if Ridder's struggling, because I need to see this thing through the season.
Yeah.
If we suck and he's not the guy, well, guess what? We have a bad we have a high draft pick. We have a good young roster. We go out, we try to find our quarterback next year.
Yeah.
Don't throw that lifeline to Taylor Heineke in week 10 because you're 3-6 at the time and you want to look better than you are, right? Don't do that. It's interesting. We focused on this comparison between the Falcons and the Bucs.
Yeah.
One team we haven't talked about, the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
They should be making headlines. They were the number 1 overall draft pick this year. They go out, they get Bryce Young. They've made moves in the offseason. They brought in Miles Sanders. They brought in Adam Thielen. They have DJ Chark, Hayden Hurst. They've done some things. They have a pretty good defense as well in their secondary, man. J.C. Horn, Von Bell, Xavier Woods. You have Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, Justin Houston. They're a decent roster as well.
Team. Yeah.
How do you view this Carolina Panthers team? Are they solely contingent on what Bryce Young looks like day one?
I don't know, because that was the question I was going to ask you. The question I was going to throw to you was, did they do enough to surround Bryce Young, to make him successful in the league in his first season? And I don't know. That's up in the air. Like, that's a question mark for me, because Miles Sanders is really good, right? Went over 1,300 rushing yards last year.
They still have Chuba Hubbard.
With the Eagles. They have Chuba Hubbard. You do have DJ Chark out there. You have Adam Thielen. You have Jonathan Mingo, a rookie wide receiver. Hayden Hurst. Who was the wide receiver? Terrace Marshall from LSU from a couple years back. Yeah, Laviska Shenault. So they got guys there that could turn into something nice within this offense. But at the same time, they didn't get anybody at the top of their class.
No, there's no impact player. This
isn't Calvin Ridley that we're adding to the offense, right? This isn't DJ Moore. They actually took DJ Moore out of the offense, right, and gave him to Chicago. So I don't know. I'm a little worried for Bryce Young, but what I do think is that he has some pieces around him. Miles Sanders, right? Adam Thielen's a veteran. He has some stable pieces around him, and then you have the upside of guys like Terrace Marshall, Laviska Shenault, Jonathan Mingo. One of those guys has to hit for them, I would imagine. And then you go to the defense on the other side of the ball for the Carolina Panthers. That's where I really like them, right? Yeah. You have the likes of Brian Burns and J.C. Horn at corner, and Von Bell and Jeremy Chin at safety. So, like, they have a nice secondary.
No, Jeremy Chin. Oh, no, they still – they actually have Jeremy Chin listed as a corner on here.
Interesting. I wonder if that's new, because he definitely was playing as a safety coming in. I don't know. That's interesting, because I remember seeing like this article about potential safeties the Eagles could look to trade for, right? And Jeremy Chin was listed on that list. But nonetheless, corner, safety, he's a great guy to have in your secondary. He's a great player. And then on the other side of J.C. Horn, you have C.J. Henderson, who you got from Jacksonville, who's another top young cornerback, right? That can make some growth this year. So I like what they have going on the defensive end. They're kind of a middle of the pack team for me. Yeah. If Bryce Young can be solid this year to good, they're still a middle of the pack team for me.
But if Bryce Young has rookie woes,
they're going to be bad. They're going to be bad. If he can be solid to good, and then they know they got their guy for the future, then they go into next offseason, they add that wide receiver 1 for Bryce Young, right?
Yeah.
So I think Carolina is more of that middle of the pack team.
I agree with you, but I do love your point where even if Bryce Young turns out to be solid from day one, right? Not a lot of growing pains, protects the football, shows that arm. I don't know if the rest of the roster's good enough to be 9-8. Right. I think if he's good his rookie year, 8-9 is probably their ceiling for me. I don't know what their schedule looks like. I haven't checked on it, but I don't think they're going to be like a surprise 10-win team.
Yeah.
Because Bryce Young has been so good this season.
Because I look back at that Eagles season, right? Not last year, but the year before that, when the Eagles went 9-8, made the playoffs. Yeah, his first year starting, and Hurts played solid to good, right? Like, he wasn't great in that year. There's times where we still had doubts about him as a thrower. And maybe that's a season that Bryce Young could have this year, right? But I don't think that Panthers team gets them to 9-8 surrounding him.
No, I agree with you. I think they're a solid bunch.
You had Smitty. Yeah. You had Goddard, right? Who is Smitty and who is Goddard in that offense? Right. Those are my questions.
Right. No, I think they're a solid group.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're anything good enough to really take them to another level. Bryce Young, man, do you have concerns over the rumors and the reports that have been leaking out about him in camp, where he at times he literally has been unable to see over the line of scrimmage and above these offensive linemen because of his size?
Yeah, it has to be a concern, right? Like, that's the only concern that there was for Bryce Young coming out of college was his height and his weight, right? His size. So yeah, it has to be a concern, but you just stick it out. You got to figure it out. And I think that's on the coaches as well, like the offensive
For
coordinator, to
sure.
put him in position because Kyler Murray is
Right.
short and he's been
Right.
successful in the
Move the
NFL.
pocket.
It
Yeah.
is possible, right? Like not every quarterback is 6'5" and standing tall in that pocket. So there are ways to work around it. The bigger concern for me would be his stature, right? His lack of size. Like if he takes a big hit in open field, what does that look like in the NFL?
Yeah.
Because Jalen Hurts, we get worried when he takes a big hit, but this guy is, squatting like
Yeah.
1,000 pounds. Like this dude is built like a tank. You look at even Lamar Jackson is a lot more sturdier
Right.
than a Bryce
Bryce
Young,
Young.
Justin Fields, right? It's sturdier guys. So the size is a concern, and I would say it's the main concern for him. So that's going to be on Carolina coaching staff. They got to take care of him this year, right?
Yeah.
They got to protect him and make sure
I
they
agree with you.
they put him in
I,
good
I
spots.
agree with you. And the interesting thing is size becomes a concern for a lot of quarterbacks, a decent amount of quarterbacks, it feels like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And we hear the same, and unless you're Drew Brees,
Yeah.
people have seemed to struggle, but
outlier.
you find different ways to make it work. You alluded to Kyler Murray. Russell Wilson's a smaller quarterback.
Yeah,
But what do they do so successfully? They move the pocket. They throw from outside the pocket. They do a bunch of different things in design. I think that's what Carolina is going to have to do year one, especially to make him comfortable, because if this kid's on his tiptoes trying to see over the right guard to make this crossing route throw, you're going to have some issues.
Yeah, seriously.
Listen, man, I want to swing back real quick to the defensive side of the ball. I want to read you some names on the defense, and which defense would you prefer to have right now this season? All right, so we'll start in Tampa. You have Vita Vea, you have Devin White, Levante David, Shaq Barrett are your linebackers. Jamel Dean, Ryan Neal, Antoine Whitfield Jr., Carlton Davis, they're all back. So that's Tampa's defense.
Yeah.
If you're Atlanta, you went out, you got Calais Campbell, you have Grady Jarrett, you have Bud Dupree, AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, Jeff Okuda. That's Atlanta's defense. Carolina, you have Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, Justin Houston, Von Bell, J.C. Horn, Xavier Woods, Jeremy Chin, Eric Rowe. Which defense would you prefer to have this year?
I think I'm going to go with the Panthers, man. I think that's who I would go with. I mean, the Bucks, they sound nice. The Falcons have made improvements, but I just like the young upside, the potential of what the Panthers could turn into this season. I think this could be a year where that defense kind of takes a step into maturity of what they really should be and make it tough on opposing offense. That would be one of the ways that the Panthers could succeed this year with Bryce Young, right? That's one of the ways you protect him, by having a really good defense. That way he doesn't have to put up 25 points a game, right? Maybe they're a team that can score 20 points and that's a win for them. So, I would say I like Carolina's defense.
No, it's interesting. I kind of agree with you. They have playmakers. I love their secondary. And when Matt Rule was there, that you and I talked about at this time last year, that's how Carolina was going to be built. They were built on the defensive side of the ball. They had a defensive-minded head coach. So you look at it from that point with some additions. Brian Burns is a premier pass rusher in this league now. They have a lot of interesting pieces. I do love what Atlanta – you go out and you get Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell and they've added some premier talent on the defensive side of the ball. Tampa Bay, I mean, they were a Super Bowl winning defense with this core a couple years ago. They were in the playoffs 2 years ago with this defense. So it's interesting, man. But I would probably agree with you. But I think all three are tough. We know the other team's tough that we're going to get to in a second. Now I'm looking over these rosters and these depth charts on defense. This could be a gritty division, man. And it's interesting because we started off the segment by talking about all new quarterback play. How are these young quarterbacks and these new systems going to fit against these gritty, tough defenses? It could be a very weird division this year.
No, I agree, man. And that's why, when you asked that question at the beginning of the show, like, does any team run away with this division? I don't know, man, because there's so many games within the division that you could win just if your defense shows up that day. And whose defense shows up more, right? Who's the team that is not going to turn the ball over? Who's going to protect the football? So you look at last season, the Tampa Bay Bucks made the playoffs at like 8-9 or something like that. And I think the Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons were like 7-10. Maybe the Falcons weren't, but I think there was two teams. No, maybe the Carolina Panthers. How'd they get the number 1 pick? They
Yeah,
had to have
well,
a
they
worse
traded
record
with
than that.
Chicago, but they were still a lower kind of pick.
Okay, yeah, they had a losing record. I know there was at least 2 teams in that division that were 7-10, and then I
Yeah,
think the Bucks were like 8-9 or 9-8, something like that.
yeah,
So yeah, I could see it playing out similar to that. I do think that is the there is the potential of the Falcons or the Bucks falling just completely to the bottom and, maybe winning like 4 or 5 games. Like, I think that is possible given their quarterback situations. But as you mentioned, the defenses are no jokes for either of those
yeah,
teams. So it's going to keep all of these teams in some games that they probably should have no business being in with the way their offense is structured. But
yeah.
as good as
I
these
agree with you.
defenses are, it's possible.
Now, I left one team out of this conversation for
Yeah.
the first 20 minutes because to me, I agree with you. Runaway is a tricky word here, especially
Yeah.
when, again, you're talking about a new quarterback. But to me, he's the best quarterback in this division. It's the best. It's been the best team in this. Well, I mean, you have Tom Brady in the Bucs, so they haven't really been the best team in this division, but best quarterback in this division now. Best defense, most solid defense, biggest home field advantage, a lot of help and supporting cast on the offensive side of the ball, and that is the New Orleans Saints, man. They are a very, very interesting team to me. You and I on the Faithful Fanatic show here on Turf Talk, when we're going to do pregame for the Eagles, we're Eagles fans. That's what we talk most about, right? And
Yeah.
we've been looking at the landscape of the NFC. And what have we been saying? It stinks, man. You look at the quarterback dropout, Rodgers goes, Brady goes. Who's really there? Dak, Cousins, Geno. You have San Fran, and their roster is legit. So they're in the running. Dallas is always going to be in the running with that defense and those weapons on offense. So Dallas is in the running. I think New Orleans is a team that is right outside of that tier that has a chance to be in the NFC Championship mix if Derek Carr is Derek Carr from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think he was unfairly scapegoated last year. Was he good? No. Did he turn the ball over a little too much? Yes. But 2 years ago, he led them to the playoffs. I believe they won a playoff game. My mind could be mistaken, but I think they won a playoff game. I'm not sure.
I can't remember.
You move him to New Orleans, and to me, just a steady environment, man. That's Vegas, Oakland. His time there was not steady. A lot of turnover, a lack of help, bad coaching. You come to New Orleans now, where by week 4, you're going to have Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams behind you. You have Chris Olave. You have Michael Thomas. You have Traquan Smith. You have Juwan Johnson. You have a good offensive line. And then they're all of that is just held down and stabilized by that defense. And that defense has been legit for the past half decade to decade plus, man, led by Cam Jordan, led by Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, Marshawn Lattimore is one of the best corners in the league. They are a solid group. And to me, they are a Derek Carr away from being in a top 3 to 4 conversation in the NFC landscape if he's good enough for them this year.
Yeah, no, I like everything you said about the Saints there. And it's a team that I've kind of come around on just recently, just looking at, the way their team's structured, looking at what they have there, just waiting for Derek Carr. And you look at some of the things we said over the last few years, like, oh, man, if they just had somebody other than Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston back there, throwing the football to these guys, they would be a completely different team with that defense and that atmosphere that New Orleans creates for those home games in that Metrodome. Like it's a crazy environment to go into and play in, right? If you're going down to New Orleans to play the Saints, especially in like a primetime game, that's not a place you really want to be going. So I do feel you there. And I think I look at the New Orleans Saints right now, like just off the top of my head, is probably the 5th best team in the NFC. And that's, with them not at their ceiling. I think their ceiling would be
top 3.
Top 3.
They're not better than Philly, and they're not better than San Fran, even if it's Brock Purdy. But to me, at their ceiling, if Derek Carr is good enough, I think Derek Carr is right behind Dak Prescott. If they're both playing equal, I don't think he's that far behind if he's on his game. So I think it's Philly and San Fran. And then if he's on his game, they can be better. They can beat Dallas. They can beat Seattle. They can beat Minnesota.
When I'm looking at it from the when I'm looking at it from the perspective of the Eagles, and the Eagles are at the top, and maybe that's where I'm having a little bit of hard time deciphering there with them being like top three, because when I look at the matchups, I think Dallas is the hardest matchup for the Eagles. Like, if I'm being like really, really like honest here, like I think the 49ers have a better team. And I
Yeah.
think when you look at their defense, it's a more intimidating than Dallas, but that Dallas pass rush, they've added some pieces on the defensive end. Dak Prescott is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy at the end of the day, and he always kills the Eagles for some reason. Like, I don't know if it's just knowing your division rivals. And quite honestly, Jalen Hurts, like as much as it's not talked about after last season, Jalen Hurts in this Eagles offense has not beaten the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott starting at quarterback. And that's just the truth. It's not
Yeah.
something I enjoy pointing out here. But when you look at the NFC as a whole, that's where the idea comes from, that I don't know if they could get top three. Like top four, yeah, I could see them. Right now, I have them behind the Seattle Seahawks. Just
really, I think they're better than Seattle. I definitely
could be. Yeah, they could be.
I hear you, but that is matchup based, and I don't disagree with you. I would argue that, but when I'm talking standings, I'm trying to personally, I'm trying to exclude matchups. Like, I'm just looking at rosters and what they can be standing wise at the end of the year. I think they're a top 4 team. I think they win their division, so they're a top 4 seed. With the upside of fighting with Dallas. I think they're better than Seattle.
Cowboys are going to cowboy against other teams. You know what I mean? Like against the 49ers, they are going to look like the Cowboys that we know and love. So, yeah. So I do feel you there. Yeah. Top 3 is not out of the realms of possibilities. That's what I would say. And
I have them at 4. I don't think they're better than I don't think they're better than Dallas right now. I think they're 4th. I think it's Philly, San Fran, Dallas, Saints. But I think if you put them head to head, I think the Saints are good enough to beat the Cowboys possibly.
I think so, and I think that speaks to how we feel about the Saints this year. And so maybe it's time to look at these offenses and defenses, rank them, and then get into these overall ranking predictions here, because it sounds like we're kind of on the same page here. The Saints, they look like a complete team with Derek Carr.
We'll just skip on the standings. We'll just skip over the standings. We know what these offenses and defenses are, man.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like the defenses, you could probably throw them in any order and fine, right? Maybe I just probably wouldn't put the Falcons as the best, but that's me personally. No. I do think they're going to be really good, and I think they were solid last year as well. But offense, I think it's very clear you can just go by quarterback situations, right? And then overall, I mean, we can get into it now. I'll let you know. Falcons are number 4 for me right now.
Interesting.
Overall, I don't see that quarterback situation going well. That's where
I'm not a Desmond Ritter guy either, man.
Yeah. What do you got at number 4?
You bring up a very interesting.
It's tough.
I have the Panthers. I'm not going to go against it. I had the Panthers coming in at 4. And I don't know why, because I agree with you. I'm not a Desmond Ritter guy, and I would be a fool to just discard of the number 1 overall pick this year and just throw him in the same category as Desmond Ritter, because that's not fair to Bryce Young. He was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. They have a good defense. They have some weapons offensively, right? We talked DJ Chark, Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst. So I don't know why. If Desmond Ritter is in a train wreck, I like the rest of the Falcons roster better. So that's why I have the Panthers coming in at number 4. I think they're probably I'm gonna go with the Falcons as a 6-win team.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, no, I think
or the Panthers. Fair. I mean, the Panthers.
When you look at the Panthers, it's like the weapons are mediocre.
Yeah,
like, that's like I hate to use that word, but it's just the perfect word for them. And so to that point, you know how important weapons are for young quarterbacks. Desmond Ritter has the weapons, Bryce Young does not. So from that standpoint, I do get where you're coming from. Number 3, man, I went with the Bucs though. I actually have the Panthers coming in at number 2, and I'll just give you obviously the Saints at number 1. I think we agree there.
No, I'll tell you right now.
Defensive driven though for me. Honestly, it is a defensive drive versus Bryce Young just not being a detriment to his team.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think Baker Mayfield could get unseated before the end of the season. I think Desmond Ritter could be a detriment to the Falcons. I just don't look at the Panthers that way. But I do get where you're coming from. Don't
No,
get me
listen,
wrong.
I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you right
Yeah.
now. I had the Saints at number 1. You had the Saints at number 1. I had the Bucks at number 3. You had the Bucks at number 3.
Yeah.
So we're on different wavelengths between the Falcons and the Panthers. So I had the Panthers at 4 and the Falcons at 2. You're reversed. Again, it's weird because you and I go through these divisions, and you know how I feel about quarterback play. And quarterback play is how you're going to win more games, especially when the rosters are not all that far off, right? You have more explosiveness with Atlanta's offense, but you can argue that Carolina's defense is better. I just, for some reason, looking over that roster, maybe I'm paying too much attention to bigger names. Yeah. I really like what Atlanta did on defense, dude. Yeah. Calais Campbell is still at the top of the game when it comes to pass rushing. Jesse Bates, you and I discussed him begging and pleading for him to come to Philly as a safety. They were already getting better defensively throughout the year last year.
They were solid last year.
I just think,
and they run the football.
Go about it, I just think the Falcons could win. I think the Falcons could legitimately win 7 games and still get second place in this division.
Yeah, I feel that, and they can run the ball really well. That was their calling card last year, and they add Bijan Robinson. So
right, correct.
I do feel you, man. The Saints.
Yeah,
it's easy. Like that's why the question at the beginning of the show was tough. Like, is there somebody that's going to run away with the division? No, but is there a consensus number one team in the division? Yes. And could they run away with the division? Yes, they could. Yeah. When you look at the defense, that's what does it for me, is that solid defense, and then you add Derek Carr. Right. You mentioned the weapons that they have already, but that defense last year ranked 5th in yards given up, and they ranked 9th in points given up, and that's with Andy Dalton playing on the other side of the ball, right? So what does it look like with a competent offense that can run an offense and actually hold on to the ball for a good amount of time?
And let's be honest, I'm going to throw home field advantage into this ring as well. Yeah. How does Desmond Ridder look in the Superdome? How does Baker Mayfield look in the Superdome? How does Bryce Young look in the Superdome? I watched Tom Brady struggle in that building the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So even how are they won the Super Bowl going to handle that?
The Bucs struggled against the Saints.
Yeah.
Like, even when the Bucs won the Super Bowl that year,
they went 0-2 against New Orleans.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a tough place to play, and that defense is no joke. Whenever you have corners like Marshawn Lattimore, and then, I can't even remember the guy that's on the other side of him right now. But
you have Tyrann Mathieu back there as well.
Tyrann Mathieu. Whenever you have guys in the secondary like that, you have Cameron Jordan, who you just locked up on the defensive line, Demario Davis. I mean, they have staples in their defense. They have an identity. And when you go into New Orleans, you're going to get hit in the mouth. And now they have a guy that can get the ball where it needs to get to, right?
Correct.
Alvin Kamara is suspended for a couple games, sure. You have Jamal Williams. He's solid. He's as solid as it gets for a running back too. Yeah. He's gonna dig into some of Kamara's usage even when Kamara comes back. So that offense, man, you got I don't know what Jimmy Graham is looking like after that situation that he ran into. I think he got arrested for something really weird out.
Who was it?
Jimmy Graham, the tight end.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's still in the roster, but he got in trouble. He got arrested for something really weird. I don't know if it's going to affect him playing at all, but you got Taysom Hill still in that offense. As annoying as he is, it will look a lot better with Derek Carr, right? And then Michael Thomas, if he can get back to anything close to being not the best wide receiver in the league, obviously, but top 20, top 25 wide receivers in the league, if he can get to that, Chris Olave is already an arguable top 20 wide receiver just after 1 year. So a lot of potential there, man.
Right. And a solid offensive line. I think
that's the other thing to throw in there. Yes. Yes.
No,
so
I think
interesting division, man.
Agreed, man. Agreed. It was a lot smoother to talk about than I originally thought. Because I kind of viewed this division in the same light as their counterpart in the AFC South.
Yeah.
You had young quarterback play. You had a kind of a runaway number 1 in Jacksonville potentially, but some upside here and there. But I was looking
at this division in comparison to the one we did last week with the North.
Huh.
And that's where we were talking about, the Saints seeding in the NFC, and I'm like, man, I would take the Saints, over any team in that division, literally. And then even, I think you look at the Falcons, right? Should they beat the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah,
probably, right?
I think so.
Probably. And I
Yeah,
mean, you go against the Bears, you're going to compete with the Bears, they're going to compete with the Lions. I think the Lions will be pretty solid this year, but I don't know. It's interesting, man. The
yeah.
defense in this division is the calling card, and I think it's going to keep them in a lot of games this year.
I agree with
All
you.
of these
It'll
teams.
be interesting, man. So here's what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to be back. We're going to break down the NFC West. We're
Yeah.
going to wrap it up with the NFC East. But in the
Hmm.
middle of those weeks, obviously we'll have to finish with the East, but we'll record and we'll give our standings. We'll
Yeah.
give our AFC and NFC 1 through 7 standings, playoffs, everything like that heading into the regular season, and kind of see how they're faring throughout the year.
Yeah. I like
So
that.
it'll be interesting, man. But that is going to wrap up the NFC South outlook. We will be back next week with the